No league win in September since 2021. 3 defeats in a row in the month with 10 goals conceded. Not looking good heading back to Fortress Rodney. This is what happened when Crewe came to town. Welcome to All New Look Back in Ambering, an exclusive Newport City Radio podcast from us, Newport County fans. Since 2010, we've been the best place to be for all things audio, and we're giving you even more in 24. Coming up in the next 45 minutes or so, I'm Luke asking all the big questions, and I'd like to ask about the breaking Welsh Cup news.
I'm Keiron, and I'd like to talk about our adaptation of formation.
Never miss out by following us wherever you find this podcast. Listen live at 2 p.m. on a Sunday and at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday after almost all League 2 home matches.
Right here.
Right here.
Right now.
Right now.
Newport City Radio.
Hello there, Keiron.
Oh, how are we? You know, I always love that intro jingle. I always get a little bit of a groove from it.
Yes, it's by the great Serge Quadriado. You know, the talented musician that he is, creating the perfect intro for a perfect podcast, talking about a perfect game of football yesterday afternoon.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't, let's just say, it was a different form of emotion to the past few weeks, I suppose, of results.
It was. Yeah, we're just going to dive straight into it. Kicking off, talk to us about Crewe's recent form and a returning player or two.
Yeah, well, in terms of Crewe's recent form, we'll go their past 5 games in League 2. 5 unbeaten, 4 wins, 1 draw. It was a 0-0 draw to Swindon, followed up by a 2-1 away win to Bromley, a 1-0 win at home to Morecambe, which tends to be a usual scoreline when Morecambe suffer defeat in the league. You then got a 1-0 away win at Accrington, and then the Saturday prior to this game, they beat Harrogate at home 3-0. So, yeah, very impressive form, and of course, you know, you can't ignore the returning players, Mickey Dimitriou, and then you talk Omar Bogle, albeit he was injured for the game.
Yeah, I think they missed someone of his presence up top yesterday. We'll come to that in a little bit. If you contrast their form to Newport County's form, I mean, there was only going to be one winner, surely. I
mean, yeah, do we even want to talk about Newport's form? Is that a thing that we want to talk about off the back end of 3 defeats?
Not really, but something we do want to talk about for Newport County, however, is who started yesterday. So, Keiron, who did start for Newport County yesterday?
In goal, the usual Nick Townsend. We then had Cameron Evans, Matt Baker, Kyle Jameson, and Anthony Glenn, and completing a back 4. Then had Keiron Evans, Aaron Wildig, Bryn Morris, Bobby Cameron, and Antwi. And then, as opposed to Fotmob, even though I don't think this is the correct formation, but they said Colton Baker-Richardson was up front alone. But, you know, whether that formation is correct or not, different question.
Yeah, it definitely looked like kind of a front 3, didn't it? With
4-2-3-1
Cameron, Evans.
4-2-3-1 is the way I kind of looked at it.
Now, I'm going to kick off by asking you a question that we, if old listeners have looked back in Ambram, or the sports show days back in 2019, and would know this question because it would be the first question that we'd always ask. At 2:59, when Hi-Ho Newport County was playing, when you were on the terrace, what were your expectations going into the game? And I'm only asking because, as I said in the intro then, we've lost 3 defeats. We've lost 3 times this month in the league, albeit we won in the Papa John's Trophy to 1-0 against West Ham at the 21s. We conceded 10 goals in those 3 games. We conceded 4 in 2, and we hadn't won in the month of September since 2021. How are you feeling going into that game yesterday?
I mean, it's not even just the things from our side. Looking at the lineup, I was relatively pleased seeing, of course, Aaron Wildig back. You saw Michael Spellman feature on the bench. So in terms of our lineup, I wouldn't say, you know, over the moon with it, because there's still a lot of key players there missing. But I was definitely pleased to see those re-additions, if you want to say it. But in terms of going into the game, I mean, you look at our form again against Crewe's form. They were looking for 5 wins in a row in the league following a relatively poor start. I think the only hope I had of us really competing and being in that game was that we were at home. Of course, we're a lot better at home than we are away, and it's proved dividends this season at times. But I would say more positive-minded than the 3 games prior. However, I wouldn't exactly say I was expecting us to pull off a performance quite like we did on the day.
As you just say, it was a great performance. You know, when we played Barrow, watching some of the highlights back, we didn't look. Correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't have a shot on target.
I'm pretty sure we didn't. I believe it was actually 2 games in a row in that point where we didn't have a shot on target. So not testing the keeper either. You know, you've got to always, I suppose, ask questions. And I think that was something that got kind of brought up on social media leading into this. It almost felt like, even though we're 6-7 games into the season, it felt like there was a lot of pressure riding on it.
Yes, and pressure on the players, on the manager, on everyone.
I felt like it would have been potentially everyone, but I saw a lot of people question Nelson Jardine, even though for, you know, the reality of the situation we're in, and you look at the injuries and the fact that we're going into a 2-year, 3-year potentially project, and we're about 3 months into it. You know, I saw a lot of people question him, say he was out of his depth and all that stuff. So I'm quite glad, if anything, to see him at full time, looking absolutely relieved. And it was weird because I don't often see managers that vocally, I suppose, expressing how pleased they were to get a result. But, you know, I was absolutely delighted for him. He looked buzzing after the end of the game.
I think everyone was buzzing after the game, weren't they?
I mean, albeit I felt I was going to pull my hair out for the 8 minutes or whatever it was of additional time. Where they came from, God knows. But it was 7-8 minutes of additional time at the end. I felt like that was probably the longest 7 minutes of my life. Very stressful.
Are they still using the additional time where pretty much everything is added together?
It seems so, yeah, because I believe they had 5 minutes added on in the first half. And again, I have no idea where they came from, but, you know, you're talking 12, 30 minutes on top of the 90 minutes. Very stressful when you're only 2-1 ahead. What
Overall, though, before we dive a little bit deeper into some players, I know that we want to talk about Carl Jameson and his heroics yesterday. What did you make of overall the performance, as we just spoke about, against Barrow, where we didn't have a shot on target? We didn't really perform. Against Port Vale, we lost our heads in the second half, as we spoke about in the previous edition of Look Back in Amber, and it kind of fell apart. What did you make of the performance yesterday?
I think the one thing you got to notice from especially our last home game is that it was a lot better disciplined. The players weren't making challenges that were unnecessary, and they were being a lot more careful. Do
you think they've learned from past mistakes?
I definitely imagine so, because that game was the one against Port Vale was such a catastrophic game for a number of reasons that I think you've kind of got to learn from that. And we've talked about how inexperienced this squad is as a whole. I think, and this is something that I think we mentioned on the last edition, the more this season will go on, the more you'll notice they gel together, and the more you'll notice they'll look more comfortable during the game. And I think that was exactly what it was. There were times where, you know, again, you're going to see this in League 2, regardless of how, I suppose, experienced your squad is. There's a few misplaced passes, or, you know, players aren't exactly positioned where they should be. I noticed especially out wide, we nearly got punished for that on numerous occasions. Thankfully, a bit of heroics from the likes of Kyle Jameson prevented that. But no, I thought the main thing that we could take from that is, one, you can tell these players are starting to get used to playing with each other. It's a lot more fluid in the way we're playing, especially when we were talking about whether playing out the back works, and we did it to, I thought, a relative, absolute T to create a few opportunities.
That's only going to get better as time goes on.
Exactly. I think that's the main thing that I took from it. One, it was a lot better disciplined. Again, you can't say it was difficult to be better disciplined than what we saw in the last home game in the league, but it looked a lot more professional. Again, it looked a lot more fluid, and the kind of transitions of play just they looked a lot smoother than we've seen in recent games. And you could tell in the games that we had lost, albeit you'd only see it in maybe 30-second bursts throughout the entire game. You can see what we're trying to do, and I think it didn't quite go perfectly. I don't think yesterday, but it was a million times better than recent performances, and like you mentioned, it'll only get better with time.
What do you think went so wrong in those last performances? Because like I say, since we last recorded an episode, we've lost 4-0 away to Swindon, who look in other games really poor. They were one of the favourites to go down this season.
Bizarre saying, by the way.
It
Bizarre
does,
saying
yeah.
Swindon Town are relegation favourites.
I was just thinking that. And are they there or thereabouts in terms of relegation?
I'd like to say they're 22nd.
Yeah, they're
21st.
3 points off the relegation zone at the moment, albeit with 8 games played. Do you see that potentially as another Yeovil? If you remember a couple of years ago when Yeovil turned us over 6-0 at home.
I think it's always going to be something that you're always going to have those results that kind of come out the blue, and you say, right, it's just a bad day at the office. You look at that Swindon game and you go, right. I said it on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it.
It's Twitter.
It's Twitter in my eyes, but I said we shot ourselves in the foot in the Port Vale game because we had such a makeshift back line. You had. Again, we'll talk about him later, but you had Keiron Evans, who is naturally a more offensive player, potentially a winger or a midfielder, definitely a lot more of an attacking-minded defender, a very bare minimum. Also on the left side, usually, playing right back. We had such a makeshift back line for that game that I think you could wipe it off. It's just one of those days, albeit 4-0, it's a very kind of humbling defeat in a way, and the fact that those 4 goals all came within such a quick succession kind of showed that makeshift backline just wasn't going to work, because I thought the more that game went on, the more the players started to gel at the back, but it didn't quite reciprocate up front. And then you talk the Barrow game, and then the kind of games that we've not performed in, and it just seems like again, like I mentioned, the team's relatively new. You talk competitive football. We played 10 games, including the cups. Actually, it's 11 if I'm not mistaken, but it's still new. They're potentially going into that Barrow game. It was a tough game to go into anyway. Going to Barrow away, they're second in the league at the minute, or third. They're definitely up there regardless. And I thought that one, even if we would have had a full strength team, we would have struggled. But more or less, it was a situation that it wasn't what we were, I suppose, used to. And it sometimes it just happens, doesn't it, where you don't see the team quite gel offensively, and passes tend to not go your way, or you won't win the kind of aerial battles. And that was the one thing I noticed against Barrow. I don't think we won one aerial battle that entire game, despite the height that team possesses and the athletic ability that team possesses. But
you mean to say we're not winning aerial battles? So 6'9" Carl Hudlin up top?
Shockingly not, but. No, I mean, it always happens when you look at Stockport last season. They started the season off horrendously. I'd like to say they lost their first 5, and they still managed to win the league and go up. And I'm not saying that's the thing that's going to happen here, but I think the thing that you've got to take on board is that if you're going to be incredibly pleased and incredibly positive after getting 3 wins on the bounce, you need to understand that that's not going to happen every week, and you will have bad spells of form. It's just how a football team works, especially with how inexperienced and young this team is at the minute.
And especially when you're, as I mentioned earlier, trying to change the way completely that you play football.
Exactly.
Now, that backline that you mentioned, they started together against Barrow. They started together yesterday. 3 of them started against West Ham under-21s. So, despite them being young, and I think Baker and Jameson obviously had the experience last season, they are starting to gel.
Yeah.
Because defensively, in that second half, Crew chucked a lot at us. They scored, obviously. They scored a second, or
Scored a second that was ruled. I think
was it a second that was ruled out offside, or
no? I believe it was. It was
or was it an equaliser that was offside before they scored their
I believe the
equaliser?
the equaliser, if I'm not mistaken, was the thing that was ruled out for offside.
So they've played together for the past 2 consecutive games, albeit a win and a defeat. They're starting to gel. There's been a lot of talk about kind of defensively soft, as I said, conceded. I think it was 10 goals in the previous 3 league games before yesterday. Do you think this could be the start of a little bit more defensive solidity? Or plus we've got Keiron Brennan to add to the mix on Tuesday. Is this that defensive stability? And what do you do with that back 4/5 on Tuesday night?
I mean, I think we'll talk about this later, but I think the players are starting to suit the 4-2-3-1 or whatever you want to call it, that back four that we saw yesterday, and I think that was something that Nelson Jardy mentioned when he came in, that he wanted to adapt the team to playing that back four and almost the modern but boring football of possession play, passing it around the back and that kind of stuff. And this is why I always mention the kind of experience. You saw yesterday that there was a lot of backwards passing and moving, of especially in midfield, but that was, of course, to create openings and create opportunities and make that opposition wonder what was being played. Because I noticed when watching, especially in the opening 10 minutes or so, that the players were running into really dangerous places, but I suppose the issue was the whether it be the quality of the final ball or the severe, not, I wouldn't say severe, but the moderate lack of communication potentially in certain aspects. And again, it'll improve with time, but I'm very pleased watching that. But I enjoyed watching that back four. I think it added a lot more options, especially centrally. Even though we were very positive out wide, I thought that you look at the likes of Cameron Antwi, for example, who was able to play off of Bryn Morris. Those two were running about everywhere, and you can't play both of them alongside alongside Wildig and Evans and Camwer and Courtney. You can't do that in a back five, and I understand the defensive stability of it, but the amount of times, especially in that final 10 minutes or so, where you're seeing Bryn Morris, you're seeing Antwi, I believe Wildig would have been off by then, or he would have came off during that final barrage, if you want to call it, from Crewe. Those players were sat there covering at the back. You've got that midfield that can almost provide, if we're needing to defend, they can almost provide a back six in the way they track back and the way they cover the pockets of space. I think the one thing that, again, I noticed, and I mentioned it earlier on, is that a little bit weak out wide. Yeah. I thought there was a lot more room than I'd imagine you'd be comfortable seeing. But
you're always going to get that when you miss someone like Shane McLaughlin. Yeah. Or I know Cameron Evans can play there, and he's played there effectively. Obviously, got the goal yesterday. But he's more of a natural centre-back than a right-back.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where you talk about, wanting, like the example of Joe Thomas back, or maybe even a Seabury to play there temporarily while you wait for Shane McLaughlin to return. But as much as I could sit here and go, there was too much area, too much space out wide. It's something that does need to be dealt with and whatnot. As much as I could complain about that, nothing really came of it. I thought that potentially it was almost a reality from the team that, right, we don't necessarily have to tightly mark and press the Crewe wingers when they're out wide. Just stick enough players inside of the box, and somebody will get in the way and block it and clear it away. And it happened a number of times, especially towards the end. So I think the adaptability and that ability to be able to almost change the way a shape traditionally gets played, that's really important. I think that was done to an absolute T yesterday.
Talking of defensive players, I want to talk to you about Carl Jameson. We spoke about him off air And I'm sure if you continue to listen to this, when we get to the Absolutely County Man of the Match segment of the show, that his name will be mentioned.
Got a bone to pick with you on that.
Again, I can't wait to hear that one. Carl Jameson. Now, he's someone that has had quite a lot of stick. Some fair criticism. But yesterday, he just looked on a complete different level to what we've seen of him previously. I remember when he came back from injury against, I want to say it was Harrogate away, and he looked unplayable. Is he back to his best?
I mean, it all depends what you see of his best. That's the best game I've seen him in a county shirt so far. That, he was... when Graham Coughlin signed him, last summer, he mentioned that Kyle Jameson offers pace as a centre-back, which not many defenders at this level do. Which
is something that we've been lacking as well.
Exactly, and I think he utilised that really well. If you would have, seen in certain aspects of that game, he was almost driving up to the midfield when we were on the ball and creating attacks.
Yeah, I think he did it once and got a free kick.
This is the bizarre thing. I remember watching this, and this gave me almost memories of Scott Bennett when you'd see him play centre-back. There was one point, and I'd like to say it was in the first half, where he's picked up the ball inside of the box following a really nice little bit of recycling of the ball from the rest of the defence. He drives the ball up way past the halfway line. He probably gets past one of them, and he's won a free kick off of it. I think the nice thing about him is that he's got that pace where if in League 2 fashion at times he loses the ball, or if the team loses the ball and he needs to, reposition and regroup, he'll get there before most attackers will. And I think what he did need was that kind of stable midfield in front of him to make sure that, he had that cover just in case one of those, like an error would show up. And, he can kind of build that confidence to where he knows what areas are covered, and he can cover a smaller range of the field really well. And having Matt Baker next to him, I think that was probably the best back two we could have went with in that situation. I think they played off of each other really well. You had almost, at times, both of them were playing in the midfield. Yeah. At times, you had, watching it, you had Cameron Evans almost drift into a lone centre-back with those other two driving into midfield. Those two complement each other so well. But no, I think Kyle Jameson was absolutely incredible. There were so many moments towards the end of the game where he would make a crucial block, or he'd make a tackle, and then be really quick to react to the ball in an attempt to clear it. And it was different, because I have seen a lot of people give him that criticism for potentially not playing the centre back we're used to in League 2. The one that sticks to their position, the one that is there as last man to put in a really big challenge and all that stuff. And then the way that he plays how a Premier League centre-back, maybe a John Stones or someone would play. I was thinking
that, like a Van Dijk.
Yeah, kind of. A little bit more offensively minded for a centre-back, which sounds really weird, but when you watch it in the Premier League, that's the kind of thing that happens. But I think he did it for a League 2 quality to an absolute T, and if he can keep playing with that it doesn't even have to be the same kind of quality, but around those levels, you'll become a cult hero at this club, because he was incredible yesterday.
It's just about finding that consistency, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And for him, like with many other players that we have in our team, it's about keeping them fit.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a few things he's had criticisms for as well, and at previous clubs as well, that he's been rather injury prone at certain times. But while you're able to select him in the team, if he can play like how he did yesterday, I don't think you'll be too bothered if he misses a game or two with injuries.
Because as I mentioned earlier, what do you do with Keiron Brennan?
It's a brilliant question, isn't it? I suppose the way we're going into obviously the busy festive period, I think there is that ability to just kind of, you maybe want to play Jameson, Brennan. You maybe want to play Brennan, Jameson. You maybe want to stick with that kind of usual back two, but it's difficult, isn't it? Because all three of the two centre backs that started yesterday, alongside Brennan, you want to start all of them, but then you want to also play the fullback. So it'll be interesting, but I think it's a healthy competition, and that's something that we've not had for a few seasons, especially at the back with all the injuries and everything.
Yes.
We haven't even mentioned James Clark, who shouldn't be too long off of coming back. Where do you fit him in? And that's a healthy problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. You know, I remember last season where we were talking about having to field 3 substitutes or 4 substitutes because I think we had more players injured than available at one time. And I remember the great Chris Keiron doing a graphic on social media saying you could actually have an 11 out of the players that we had injured. It was pretty good 11 as well at that. I think it'll probably be better than...
It was bizarre. And isn't it mental that you have a goalkeeper injured at that point as well? That's bizarre to me. But yeah, I mean, we've got that. We've still not got potentially every position covered with plenty of depth. Like we've seen it right back potentially that let's say Cameron Evans picks up a knock or something or a suspension or whatnot. You question who do you fit in for him for the time being, but for the most part, I think we've got a lot more healthy competition and options than we did last season or even, the past seasons gone by.
And then that helps Jardim kind of, A, to see the games out, and B, as we've seen yesterday, to go on and win games.
Yeah, exactly. We're able to change game plans really efficiently and suit to what's going on. I thought his substitutes yesterday were absolutely spot on. I think when he brought off Courtney Baker-Richardson for Kyle Hudlin, and then he brought off, was it Wildig for...
Ollie Greaves.
Yeah, Wildig for Ollie Greaves and whatnot.
And then a minute later, we scored.
Yeah, I think those subs were absolutely spot on because you could see that those players were tired and that they kind of, given their all for that game. And having those options, and Kyle Hudlin was brilliant, weirdly, playing a centre-back, even though he's a striker. The coverage he kind of brought in that back line during the bombardment of crew attacks in the final, 7 minutes of stoppage time. It was impressive. But I suppose when you're 6'9", you have a lot more kind of body to block the ball with.
Do you think we'll see more of that from him going forward?
I'd hope so. But then there's also the part of me that goes, you imagine when Cargbo's back, you play a front two of Cargbo and Hudlin, 6'6", 6'9". You get Michael Spellman on the right. You get Bobby Cameron on the left. You've got a midfield two then of Antwi and Bryn Morris. McLaughlin, Glennon, play it down the wings, cross it into the middle. Just imagine how fun that would be.
Well, this is why EAFC exists.
Exactly. Well, I will be fully honest with you. I play the AFC 25. And I do exactly that. And I celebrate every time I get a corner because I'm like, I'm guaranteed to score here because I've got a 6'9" and a 6'6" striker. But the fact that in real life context that we're able to talk about that as a possibility and not having to almost stick to one format of playing football, that's the exciting thing because it means that we can tackle each game individually and suit ourselves to deal with opposition better than we would have last season.
And talk to me just quickly before we move on to the absolutely county man of the match. What on earth was the Philip Marshall, the Crew goalkeeper, doing in that second half?
He had a bit of a nightmare in that second half, didn't he?
He did.
I will give huge credit and huge applause to Mickey Demetriou, though. The Crew keeper's made an absolute blunder and he's missed the ball. He's let it bounce over him. Courtney Baker-Richardson is one-on-one. He's got an empty net. And somehow, someway, Mickey Demetriou has been able to get back before, Courtney Baker-Richardson is literally able to get a tap in from about 8 yards out. And he's went in from he's went in from behind, but also from the side, and he's got all ball. That's a really impressive challenge. But there were a few other moments, wasn't there, where he didn't look too comfortable on the ball, and on a different day, we capitalise on probably 2 or 3 of his mistakes. But I suppose when you're a League Two footballer for a reason, aren't you? You're not Premier League quality as of that moment.
He's on loan from Aston Villa.
I don't think he's going to play for Aston Villa. I'm going to be brutally honest with you.
Bold prediction.
Does he play for Aston? Bold prediction, guys. Cruz, goalkeeper, won't play for Aston Villa. Maybe he will. Who knows? Maybe he'll play in a cup game. Actually, he will play for Aston Villa at some point.
I'll come back to this when he's a Champions League winning, Euro winning goalkeeper, and he's just won the Yashin Award for best goalkeeper in the world.
He's just won the Ballon d'Or for scoring 17 goals as a goalkeeper. I cannot wait.
The last thing that remains, though, for this segment is the most important thing, and you say you have a bone to pick with me for this.
I do.
So here we go. You're absolutely counting man of the match on social media. So the options were Matty Baker, Carl Jameson, Cameron Evans, or other, which you can let me know who your favourite was.
All centre-backs, by the way.
Yes, all centre-backs. I thought it was a very defensively excellent performance, considering the 10 goals, as I just mentioned, that we conceded in the past 3 games before yesterday.
You're the second worst defence in the league, joint.
That's a stat right there. For them to turn around and be under a lot of pressure in that second half. I think I tweeted at halftime saying it's about weathering the Crew storm, because in that first half they looked like they didn't get going. And they didn't look like they were playing the Crew that got them to the playoff final last season. And for us to stop them with all their attacking quality that they have, we know what a Mickey Dimitri long throwing can do. We've seen it for many years. I just thought that the defensively we were excellent yesterday. Plus it helps when 2 of them score.
And one of them scores a worldie as well.
I know. So, who was your player of the match yesterday? I know you've got a bone to pick with me, so I'm going to hear you out.
I've got a bone to pick with you in that I did choose Kyle Jameson. However, I understand that Twitter only allows you to put 4 options, and you wanted to go for the 3 centre-backs, and you wanted to go for the other option. But I got a bone to pick with you, Mr. Luke.
Oh, no.
Where is the everyone option? That entire team deserve that man of the match for how they performed.
To be fair, everyone from Nick Townsend who made 1 or 2
world-class saves as per usual. It's standard for him at this point. When
called upon, all the way through to Baker Richardson, who I thought led to the line really, really well yesterday. See, with Cameron and Keiron Evans.
It's a positive bone to pick with you. It's not like I'm sat here going, you missed this player. Get everyone on there next time.
Well, for the past couple of games, I felt like putting no one on there.
Well, for the positive game then, why is everyone not on there, Luke? You don't have a reason.
Check back after Salford.
Check back after. If I don't have an everyone option when we inevitably probably either draw or lose to Salford, I'm going to be livid.
So, in all seriousness, though, yesterday, who was your man of the match, apart from everyone?
From your options, I did go Kyle Jameson, which I'm going to assume got the resounding majority of the vote.
He did. 65.8% of people agree with you, and Kyle Jameson, sponsored by Jameson, which I think is really cool.
I'm surprised they didn't take that opportunity sooner, to be honest with you.
I wonder if there's any more players with brand names.
I'd imagine so. There's definitely got to be. All right, this is time for another podcast, guys. Welcome to the guessing footballer brand names.
Get Baker sponsored by a bakery.
Yeah. Is there a player with a last name Asda, maybe? Asda. Probably not. Sainsbury's. Morrison's. Morrison! Sean Morrison. There we go.
There was a Sainsbury. I'm sure he used to play for Celtic. He's an Australian player.
I'm just saying.
New podcast in the works at Newport City Radio.
Yep, this is the plan.
apart from talking about players and which different companies could sponsor them, what do you want to talk about, Keiron?
I mean, we've went into it very briefly, but I'd like to talk about how we've been able to adapt our formation.
Right here, right now.
Newport City Radio.
Well, we went into this very briefly, and I'd imagine we'll have a very brief kind of discussion on it here. But we've noticed two, I suppose, familiar shapes as we went into this season, being a 4-2-3-1, if you want to put it that way, and then you've got maybe, I don't know, a 5-2-1-2, something along those lines. But either way, and I believe I asked you this the last time we were on here, in that should we adapt to fit with what Nelson Jardine wanted coming into the club and adapt to the back four. But I'm going to ask you it again following the result yesterday. Do you think that the back four is kind of the way to go looking forward?
I think so. And this is someone who's been brought up on that 5 back, whether it be under Flinney or going forward, and Graham Coughlin last couple of seasons. But I think that obviously this new way that we want to play, does it work with a 5 back? Plus, if you think about the midfield quality that we have, we've got Kieran Evans, you've got Noah Mwene, you've got Bryn Morris, you've got Aaron Wildig, you've got Jacob Miley? Lewis Miley? Which one is he?
It's Jamie Miley.
Jamie Miley.
Close.
My close, but no
maybe
cigar.
Maybe they have a third brother. Who knows?
Maybe. You've got Cameron Antwi. I think there's too much midfield talent in there. I know you mentioned earlier about kind of good selection headaches. But if you've got 6 or 7 quality midfielders that all could start, you got Ollie Greaves as well on the bench and people like that. They're too good to be leaving out.
Yeah, exactly. It's the thing that I think when we saw it against, we saw it against Cheltenham on the opening day, we saw it against Leighton, and we could tell that those players, they haven't associated each other with that kind of suited formation for a good while. You had the likes of James Clark and even Kyle Jameson, the familiar players that we know from last season and seasons gone by, who, like us, will be familiar to the back five, whether it be under Flinney, under Rowbury, even under the likes of Graham Coughlin last season and the brief period of the season prior. Yet saying that, I think Rowbury was the one who kind of tried to change it a little bit. But
he did with the 4-box-2 formation, which I know Stephen Howell, formerly of these shows here on Look Back In, absolutely despised.
Yeah, I mean, you could see that he was trying to almost play the thing we're going for now. Obviously, he had that reliability in certain games to change to a back five and the thing that we're usually familiar to, but that didn't work, and I think it maybe pushed a lot of people away from the idea of a back four. But you looked at the games, like I mentioned, the opening 2 games where we tried to play that back four, and like I mentioned, you could tell that they weren't suited. Some of them weren't used to playing a back five, some of them not used to playing football, full stop, and going with that severe change it's something that, like we've mentioned before, requires patience. And I think we saw the first sign of a reward against Crewe with the back four.
I'm going to throw this question your way, because obviously back four we've played yesterday and we played against Barrow as well last weekend. Is this a temporary solution for injuries and suspensions?
It's a good question, isn't it? Because obviously you've got Brennan. I mean, Brennan's no longer suspended. You've got Clark out. You've got, well, in terms of defenders, you've got Joe Thomas, McLaughlin out. Seabury, for whatever reason, isn't featuring too much. But
I don't think he's a favourite of Jardine.
Yeah, I don't know. I quite liked him last season before obviously he picked up that injury. So I'd like to see him kind of phase into the squad a little bit for for certain cameo appearances. But I think the kind of follow-up question, and it's almost the one you answered going into this, is that why would we, when these players are back, why would we suit ourselves back to a 5-back when we've seen what the 4-back can do? We know we don't have too much cover in defence as opposed to where we do in midfield. And like you mentioned, the quality of midfielders and the range of things they provide is surely far too influential and positive to entirely neglect the idea of a back four and potentially a less stable back line in certain games.
Plus, you get the best of like the likes of Bobby Camera in this formation. You know, when you're playing a 5-back, when you're playing with 2 up top, is he a striker? No, he's a winger.
And then you even talk Michael Spellman, who made a 10-minute cameo appearance yesterday, which, by the way, I thought he was absolute quality. You can tell he's almost that opposite-sided camera in the way that he takes players on and whatnot. You've got him again. You've got Greaves. You more associate him with being a winger. You've got Rye to that degree, who again associate with being more of a winger than a striker with his kind of physical presence. And again, that midfield, you've got players that are potentially more attacking minded than defensive minded with covering and whatnot. Whether you talk Kai Whitmore, you know, the kind of way that he drives forward. I don't think necessarily this season, but in prior, Aaron Wildig. I think this season he's kind of balancing his game a lot more to add that defensive stability into his game, which you'd expect from a player who is the captain and whatnot. You'd like him to be able to easily communicate and whatnot with the defense and those other minded midfielders. And then you've even got the likes of Bobby Camo, who can do a mix of both, but you'd probably put him more on the attacking side.
Yeah, I'm just looking here on transfermarket.com or .co.uk as it is here. I think we've got 8 midfielders: Bryn Morris, Noah Mulroney, Aaron Wildig, Kai Whitmore, Cameron Antwi, Jamie Miley, Keiron Evans, and Ali Greaves.
And this is the thing, you're even ignoring Mulroney and you're ignoring Jamie Miley here, who are attacking-minded midfielders.
And still, you got Morris, Wildig, Antwi, Evans, Greaves.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously you've got that's such a range of attacking quality, and not even just that those players are most of them anyway are young. They're going to be able to learn the game a lot more, and they're going to be able to get used to balancing their game of attack and defense to provide that extra cover to the defense, to support the likes of Jameson and Baker, whoever's playing at the back. And I think having that, whether you want to call it a 4-2-3-1, whether you want to call it a 4-5-1, depending on whether the midfield's flat or not. Most of the time, of course, it's not. I think that provides so much more creatively and so much more, at times, defensively when needed. It's a lot easier for me to look at that formation and see how the team adapts to certain situations than it is with a 5-back, because let's be fair, when you play a 5-back, all you can really do is tell your wing backs to get up a bit more. And you know, with a 4-back, you have so many different variations of it that you can change to, whether it be wide or narrow. And you could even argue Bryn Morris, if need be, can drop back into defence, and then you've almost got that direct change. But yeah, I think it's the thing that's really interesting for me, because we've seen how the 4-back can not work due to the lack of experience, which again is due to the fact we're currently in a 2-3 year project with this group of players, and we're 2 months into it. But you can also see where it works, where, you know, later down the line, like we've seen here, where they're starting to evidently gel together. So, you know, it's something that I've said probably about 1 billion times over the past 2 months. Patience. Rome wasn't built in a day, guys. It wasn't. That patience is definitely needed. Thank you, Keiron. Of course.
Coming up next, I'd like to ask about the breaking news surrounding the Welsh Cup.
Right here, right now. This is Newport City Radio.
Karma, that is. That's karma.
Yeah, I've just clicked my elbow. That was very unpleasant.
So for my talking point this week, it's not necessarily a talking point on the game. It's a talking point around breaking news that came out this morning from David Pritchard, who I believe is at the BBC, and his tweet said, it's an exclusive credit to him, Cardiff, Swansea, Newport, Wrexham back in Europe. They're in talks to the FAW about entering the Welsh League Cup to qualify for Europe. Clubs should stay in the EFL but sacrifice the right to qualify via English competitions. UEFA and the FA are aware, and he said this could be huge. I think this is too big of a news story not to cover as we record this on Sunday. So I'm just going to kick off, Keiron, and ask you what do you make of this? I've seen so much reaction so far on X and on Facebook. What do you think of this?
I don't know. I've read the statement countless times, and I don't know whether to feel positive or negative about it. My one question, which would be potentially more credited and more valued if this kind of idea projects itself more and becomes more concrete, what happens to the likes of the FA Cup and the likes of the EFL Cup? Because do we potentially sacrifice the EFL Cup for that entrance? And then I see the positives and negatives to it, and I'll go through them in my eyes very briefly. The positives to me when looking at that is, one, the attendance and the eyes on the Welsh leagues and Welsh domestic football will go up tremendously. There'll be so many people who will be interested in watching, for example, a Penabont versus Cardiff, or you could maybe even talk a Newport City versus Newport County kind of thing.
Against Swansea.
Exactly. There's so many fixtures there.
Wrexham, Connors Quay.
There's so many fixtures there that I think you look at and you go, wow, you go, those are things that you'll have eyes on, and it'll potentially give, I wouldn't say more competition to the likes of TNS, but what you'll see, and I think this is something that I've seen questioned so many times, is how good actually is the Welsh League in comparison to the rest of the world in terms of football and in terms of the FL. This, for me, will be able to not give you a concrete idea, but a lot better of an idea, which I think is very exciting, because we can see the standard of the top tier of Welsh football. The negatives for me is that, in one way, it's unfair to the Welsh domestic clubs.
Yes.
They're going to be losing one of their European qualifying spots, which I believe is the Conference League one. It's not the Champions League one. It's not the Europa League one. It's the Conference League one they're sacrificing, which was it? Oh, who were the ones that got it this season? I can't quite remember.
Carnarvon. And they ended up beating...
Oh, was it the Northern Irish champions or something?
It was
along those
someone from
lines?
Northern Ireland, and then ended up playing Legia also.
Yeah, and they end up obviously losing that, but it's unfair in that regard that they'll be losing a spot. You then also say, I suppose, why should the clubs that are competing in the English system all of a sudden get a benefit from the Welsh League when that kind of revenue should be split amongst the Welsh domestic clubs, which again I see the entire idea towards. I am personally just swaying against it, because I'm in the thought process.
Do you not want to see Newport County go away to a Lithuanian second-tier side on a cold Thursday night?
I mean, it's close enough when you go to Harrogate, isn't it? But, I mean, this is my thing. We've been in, obviously, the reason these four clubs are in the English leagues is because the Welsh League wasn't a thing at the point of us being in the EFL, and the same with Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham, even the likes of, like Merthyr and whatnot. So I'm in the thought process of we've qualified for everything, and if we are to qualify through things, it should be through the current system and the current league that we're competing in domestically, which is the EFL, which does mean we'd have to win the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup to have the potential of a lovely Thursday night in Lithuania in the middle of God knows where. But I think it's unfair to take a European spot, especially off of one of the clubs that, you know, would have worked all season to get to that point. And, you know, especially after we've now seen that the New Saints have actually got to this point of being in the group stage of a European competition, it potentially will project the entire Welsh domestic league to up their game, that you'll see potentially more revenue go there. And the revenue would absolutely shoot up if these clubs were in there. But it would also take the fairness of a Welsh club competing in that cup and potentially getting into, you know, a European competition, which would be massive for their kind of local town or whatnot. It doesn't quite take it away, because for all you know, we could play anyone, right? We could play Newton or someone. Yeah. We could lose to them, but there's probably a big chance we won't if you're talking full strength versus full strength. But I'm just about going against it. I understand the positives and the negatives for it, but personally, I think that because we've survived so long competing in the English leagues, and we know what it takes and what you need to do to get to a European competition, you shouldn't really cheat out of it by just going, right, we're going to play against these Welsh domestic clubs and have a lot more of a chance to do it. Albeit it would be potentially, again, revenue benefiting and attendance benefiting to the entire Welsh League, and you do question, how is the Welsh League going to further progress in terms of attendances? This would be a very shortcut way to do it, but I feel like Welsh football is growing enough in itself to where it'll get to a healthy, sustainable, positive, uplifting way within its own natural growth, and it doesn't need this injection of EFL clubs to do it.
I mean, Newport County's academy side are already in the League Cup. Yeah,
it's weird, right? I mean, I kind of understand the academy a bit more because you know,
like Bristol. What is it at the moment? Is it the Bristol Street Motors Trophy, Papa John's Trophy, the sponsor a trophy? Yeah,
I don't actually remember the name of it. It's long name, brand can't remember. Trophy. That's the one, the EFL trophy. Yeah, you know that. I'd understand. This is another thing, right? Where let's say we didn't take this cup competition very seriously, and we just sent the academy out to do it, like we did when we were in the FAW trophy, FAW amateur trophy, or something along those lines that we were put into this season.
I think it was the League Cup we were put into this season.
Was it the League Cup we were put into this season? And of course, we went out because did we have a pre-season game against Yeovil or someone on exactly the same day? Let's say we bring out an academy side and we end up winning. Some people see that and go, Welsh League's terrible quality, and does that bring more positive eyes on the division?
I think Cardiff got to the semi-final last season. They're under 21s.
Yeah, exactly. And I understand in the way that it'll get more eyes on the division. It'll get more seats filled, and it'll provide more positive, I suppose, attention, and just more attention in general. But I do think Welsh football's on the rise, and a comfortable rise, albeit it wouldn't be as quick without these teams involved. But it's on a steady and comfortable rise, and we've seen that with the progression TNS have made, and and especially with how this season's looking at panning out in the top flight and how exciting it could be. And I think, this division's relatively new as well when you talk in comparison to the EFL. So
with the expansion as well that was announced in the week.
You've got the expansion as well, which will only benefit it. I think that expansion idea is fantastic. I've seen a few people say it's very Americanized, but I think you've got to do something unique as this kind of Welsh domestic league to push yourself out more and stand out, especially when your next door neighbours have the biggest football organisation on the planet. So I think that that kind of stuff's necessary change for the league to grow and for it to positively influence itself naturally. So I'm just about swing against it, but I would understand the reasons for and against.
On the contrary, you just mentioned about, if we were to play Newport City or Pen y Bont played Cardiff, Barry Cardiff, or Conskew Wrexham, or...
By the way, to anyone from Barry, I know a lot of you say that you don't like saying you're from Cardiff. What does your postcode start with? CF. That's Cardiff, guys. You're in Cardiff. Right, thank you.
It's rant time on Newport City Radio.
I just had to point that out there because I've seen a lot of just people from Barry saying they don't want to say they're from Cardiff. You're from Cardiff, guys.
So, on the contrary to that, what about when we've had Man United down in the FA Cup? Man City, Tottenham, we've had West Ham, Brentford. We've been incredibly lucky. Let's be straight with cup draws and performances and whatever. But if we do this, is it worth sacrificing going up against three teams who are two divisions and one is one division above you respectively, got a way far bigger budget than you, have better players than you, whether we want to admit it or not? All that for a shot at European football where only one can win?
Not to mention, you start off in the qualifying rounds.
Yes.
So you could win this cup and qualify for Europe. You can't see this, but I'm putting up quotation signs here with my hands. And then all of a sudden you go out in the first qualifying round and European tour's over. Yeah. Fantastic news. Is that worth potentially in an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup playing a massive side and having all that revenue potential
on TV in front of millions of eyes around the world against some of the best players in the world?
Exactly. Like, what other opportunity are we going to get to do that realistically? Because realistically, you talk the way modern football works, it would be near impossible for us to get near the Premier League and that kind of stuff. Maybe you could say Championship, maybe in a Hugh Jenkins, what he's done in the past kind of thing. But the way modern football works, you need billions to kind of get to that level, and that's the magic of the FA Cup and the EFL Cup to a lesser extent, that you have that chance to play these sides. And most of the time, when we saw United come here, last season in January, they put out a really, really strong side. So most of the time, they respect you enough and understand what you can do and then you have the chance of beating them. We beat Leicester all over the news for weeks. It was you will not get that opportunity if we win the Welsh Cup, qualify for the Conference League via the qualifying rounds, or go into the qualifying rounds of the Conference League and then go out the first round to Derry City or someone. We're not going to get that same level of coverage. So you then question, how much does it benefit those clubs in the those big four, if you want to put it that way? How much does it benefit them either?
Plus, as I just mentioned, only one is going to get that spot each season.
Exactly, and would probably be the least likely to do it.
Yes.
If you look, you look at Wrexham League One, Cardiff, Swansea Championship. You maybe talk realistically, and you say TNS could be on a level with us.
Yes.
So we, in our case, being incredibly selfish, would we even get to that point? Maybe we could, but on paper, it's unlikely.
Unlikely. I do definitely agree with you and think that it does deprive Welsh domestic Welsh sides the opportunity, because as you mentioned about Carnarvon this season went away to Legia Warsaw, and yes, they got turned over 11-0 on aggregate, but still, that for those players who are part-time and, you know, play more for the love of the game than anything else, for them to go and have the opportunity to cause a few headlines and go out and play against one of the
literally the biggest team in Poland.
Yeah,
you know,
and a team that's known on the continent.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. You know, we've talked about our potential unfairness in a way that we'd have to potentially sacrifice the EFL or Carabao Cup and then miss out on the chance to play one of these bigger sides in the later stages of the competition. Say it's the same with the domestic Welsh league sides. They will potentially miss out on a chance to play a Legia Warsaw.
Makes it less competitive at the end of the season as well. When you're trying to qualify for the end of season playoffs to get that last European spot.
They won't fight as much potentially because they'll go, we have to play Cardiff and they've not got too much to fight for this season. They're just going to go full strength here with an opportunity to play in a European competition. So I think for me it would need to almost be worked around, whether that be right, scrap the European spot, just give it to whoever finishes third in the division. Just give that kind of spot to them. But then potentially, if you're talking, what benefit does it then bring to the Welsh league clubs? Maybe, or not the Welsh league clubs, but the Welsh teams in the FL. Then it gives them a reason to go, right, we'll play some rotational players and some academy players, and we'll give them a chance to develop enough and develop further to get towards a first team level. So I think that for me would give these clubs enough incentive to compete, where it's almost an extra competition that has more eyes on it for academy players or rotational players and all this other stuff. And we've seen how beneficial the Welsh League in terms of transfers can be as well, yes. And it gives those players opportunities to literally show themselves off to the clubs directly. So for me, that would be my personal way of going about it. I don't understand how the kind of juxtapositions work and whether you can kind of move those European qualification spots as easily, but I think if you're in the realm of possibility of being able to reduce 4 EFL clubs into a Welsh competition, surely moving a European qualifying spot wouldn't be too difficult.
Mm-mm. Anyway, thanks for that.
Of course.
I feel like we rambled on for about 20 minutes.
I think it was about 10, 15, wasn't it? God knows.
God knows. Coming up next, though, something we do know, we will be talking next game predictions.
Right here.
Right here.
Right now.
Right now. Newport City Radio.
And yes, next game predictions are upon us. Now, we play Salford on Tuesday night.
Oh, yay.
We've played them 9 times, I believe it is, since they got promoted. Are you ready for this?
Beat them once, haven't we, in the FA Cup?
This is in the league.
Never
I've only
counted
7 defeats, 2 draws. We've never beaten Salford since they've been promoted.
Fantastic news.
With that being said, we broke one curse. We broke one curse on Saturday, beating Crewe, winning a game of football in September. Are we going to break another curse on Tuesday night against Salford? What's the score going to be?
I'm sorry for saying this, but I hear a Salford fan say this to me, who I'm good friends with, and I can't not agree with him. I'm going to go for the most boring 0-0 potentially of all time. Because that based off of my talks with a Salford fan, that's how they set up. So, if we beat them 1-0, there won't be much in it, though.
I think that we'll have...
Predict a win, Luke. Predict a win, please.
We're going to win 7-0.
That'll do.
We're going to have Carl Hudlin score 4.
That'll do.
You'll head another 2 down to Spellman, who'll score. Cameron will score a screamer.
Yeah, you want to add a Nick Townsend free kick on top of that?
Oh yeah, well? Of course. I do think though, with the return of Keiron Brennan, that does add a lot of defensive options especially off the bench, which, have we had that previously? Thinking more the past year? No.
Yeah,
You've got Baker, you've got Jameson, you've got even Keiron Evans, you've got him. I don't think James Clark, as you said, is too far away.
I think my issue with the game is that the way I've seen Salford this season is that they're a lot more focused on keeping the ball out of their net, than putting the ball in the opposition net.
Could it be like a 70% possession game for Newport County?
That's how I'm seeing it.
With that being said, I know that Bryn Morris can score something out of nothing, and we've seen Bobby Camwell cut in from the left-hand side, and I think he scored a screamer against, was it Accrington or Doncaster when he did that and cut in from the
Doncaster
on his right foot and score?
I'd like to say Doncaster.
So if they do sit back and try and contain us, then I do definitely see us having the capability of scoring a worldie. So I'm going to say 2-1 Newport.
Woo! We're going to win, guys. We're going to win.
Which then moves us on to... We're not playing next Saturday. We're playing next Monday against Bradford live on actual television. Not Sky Sports Plus, but Sky Sports itself. Against Bradford.
I gotta say, 8 o'clock kickoff on a Monday in Bradford. That is honking. That is awful. But, TV, I guess. Woohoo.
We'll be on telly. We always do well on telly. What's the score going to be when we are on telly against Bradford City?
Fantastic. You know what? We'll win an away game. 2-1 to the massive county.
Yeah, I think it'll be a 1-0. We'll sneak through. And then up against Harrogate away. Quickly, what's the score going to be there?
That's a difficult one, isn't it? 1-1.
4-0 Newport. We always seem to beat them 4-0 at some point, so we'll be there. And then we return to home on the 18th of October against Cheltenham. A Friday night game. Chesterfield. I'm getting my C's mixed up. Chesterfield return to Rodney Parade in October on the 18th on a Friday night at 8 p.m. What's the score going to be there?
5-0 either way. You heard it here first.
3-2 Newport will be a tight game, but there'll be plenty of goals. Anyway, we'll be back then to talk about the Cheltenham.
You're really good at this.
Chesterfield, I am. Anyone would think I've been doing this for years. Thank you for taking the time out to listen today. As always, we'd love to read your thoughts about our thoughts from Facebook, X and Instagram via direct message. Also, we're on email at contact@newportcityradio.org. We'll catch you on Sunday the 20th of October at 2 p.m. as we continue to look back in Amber at the 2024-25 season. More talking points, more banter, and as always, more top-class analysis. We'll see you then.
County.
Right here.
Right here.
Right now.
Right now. Newport City Radio.